Welcome to the Krypton Report podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, the Superman of Blue. And with me is my co-host in crime, the man who fights truth and justice. Wait, that's a villain.
I fight truth and justice? I thought we fought for truth and justice.
Fights for truth and justice, Mr. James Cole. What's up, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, Tyler?
And as part of our special, with this being every month our goal is to get another podcaster as a guest. We have Mr. Perry Constantine. First time on this show. I've been on his show, Superhero Cinephiles. Welcome, Perry.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Glad to talk with you as always, and glad to meet James. So looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's going to be good.
To meet you, man.
If you haven't checked out Superhero Cinephiles, you should. It's great conversations with Perry and his guests over comic book movies spanning all time, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. We got the stuff that everybody knows and the stuff that nobody's ever heard of. We cover them all.
That's the best. I want to do, James, one year, you and I, we're going to dive into 90s comic book films, but we're talking The Phantom, The Shadow, that stuff. But yeah. Perry,
I was waiting till we get through the DC stuff and where it will eventually expand.
I love The Phantom with Billy Zane. That's one of those.
The Phantom is actually legit awesome. We covered that on the show about a few years back. Shadow doesn't hold up as well, but The Phantom definitely really holds up.
I think, yeah, the Shadow, to me, even as a kid, when I watched that movie, I didn't see it in theaters. I rented it. And it just, something about it always seemed off. And I watched it a couple of years ago with my buddy Brian. But check this out. So 7-Eleven used to have these, okay? My brother and I had them as kids. But then my brother found one a couple of years ago and got it for me for Christmas.
Oh, nice.
It's awesome. A skull ring from The Phantom. Because we went and saw that in theaters, and I really enjoyed it. So, but Perry, as a movie guy and a comic book guy, what are your current feelings on Superman 2025?
I am so psyched. James Gunn, in my mind, can do no wrong these days. The Guardians trilogy is probably my favorite trilogy of the MCU. Other stuff he's done, like Brightburn, which he produced that. I'm not sure, he may have been involved in the writing of that too, but that was awesome.
It was his brother.
Loved. Yeah. And I think he was just involved as a producer, but still really great in that. He wrote the Dawn of the Dead remake, the Suicide Squad and the Peacemaker TV show. Loved both of those. I was totally surprised by Peacemaker. I was not expecting to like that as much as I did, but man, I ended up developing a much more respect for John Cena as well after watching that. He's incredible performer, really talented guy too, and that never really came through in anything I've seen him in before Peacemaker. But
I agree.
Yeah,
and I think that let's see, I saw Fast 9, and he was just very boring in that. And that same year, I think it's when the Suicide Squad came out, I loved it. I said, that's the power of a director, knowing your actor and getting the performance and everything from them.
Absolutely. No, so I cannot wait for this. As soon as he said that he was going to be doing Superman, I was on board. Love the Creature Commandos. I'd recently finished that up a few months back. Thought that was a lot of fun. And just what we've seen from the trailers so far, the behind the scenes look, he definitely feels like he's got a handle on this character that no one's really had a handle on in a while in this medium.
I agree with you. My hesitation was, we talked about this a lot before, is James Gunn's done a great job with taking C-list characters and kind of tweaking them and redoing them a little bit and making them prominent, much like Peacemaker. But he hasn't directed anything with characters that are very well established. And that was one of my hesitance with Superman. I was like, can he go in there and not James Gunnify, the characters, and just actually be able to find the voice of the characters? I mean, nobody really knew, nor did they care about the Guardians of the Galaxy before James Gunn. And then he put his spin on it, and now everybody loves him. Now everybody's like, I am Groot, or you know,
Right.
I am James. So
the Gunify, I mean, you know, Suicide Squad is really fun, and it's an R-rated film, and it you know, it's got a lot of, like you said, like C-list characters. I mean, heck, most of the people, half of them who die are like D-list characters, you know. But there's so much of that, and Peacemaker too. There's just so much of that crass humor, that potty mouth humor, and a lot of that language, and that's just stuff that doesn't fit in most of the people who surround Superman.
right.
Most of the people who surround Superman and Clark Kent are in somewhat of a formal or professional setting, you know, and that's not typically what goes on. So it just leans a little different way. I haven't like not been hesitant about it or anything like that coming up. Like I said, he is the guy who gave us the Guardians trilogy, and you know, made you believe that all of those aliens exist, and you know, just leaning into that sci-fi.
Little old Laura, she gets excited. She can't wait to podcast with us one day.
Yeah, I got when my kids are here, it's the same way. Fortunately, they are out for the moment. My son might be back soon though, so
it's all good.
He'll probably be charging it at some point.
This is a family podcast. That's what we try to keep it at, because, you know, as you notice, my daughter came down. She'll probably come down again. Solomon will probably come down at some point. That's just what they do. It's how it is. We just roll with it. My idea for the podcast is always like, it feels like you're hanging out with your friends, and like you're just in the other room, like refilling snacks. So it's like you hear everything, you hear the conversation, you feel the tension of the kids bothering them, you know, and you're like just filling up the chips. Like, I'm getting some more chips.
Yeah, try getting a 3-year-old to stop.
Yeah.
my
son's almost 3, my daughter's 4, so I know what that's like.
Right.
Now, I want to say one thing, James. Did I do my rant? I made notes about it, but I don't remember if I actually said it. That's how crazy my brain has been. Did I make a rant about directors who work with the same, like, production people?
Yeah, I believe you said something about that a couple of recordings ago, just how
I thought
he's brought over a lot of the same people that he's worked with on a lot of the,
because people are, you know, complaining about the cinematography. Oh, it looks like Guardians. The costumes looks like Guardians. Well, he's bringing his same costumer. He's bringing his same cinematographer he's worked with on previous films. And it's the crew that he works with that he's comfortable with. And it's just kind of like how we talked about BVS felt more like a Zack Snyder film because he brought Larry Fong back.
Yeah.
Larry Fong was his DP on like every other movie but Man of Steel. And that's why you can watch you can watch BVS in Watchmen, and they feel very similar because it's the same director, same costumer, same cinematographer. And it's like directors just have their people, you know?
It's the thing that's kind of funny, just this day and age with comic book movies and stuff. Everybody still calls it a costume, you know, when in the movie it's not a costume. In the movie it's a uniform, it's a tactical for some reason, it's a suit for whatever reason. So I understand that it's a costume and they're playing, you know, they're pretending, but that's not the world that they're in. It's supposed to be somewhat practical. And I mean, just along the lines of the suit, I mean, you know, I seen recently pop up a couple of times, people talking about the difference in Henry Cavill's suit and David Cornsweat's suit right now. And, you know, me and you have talked about it, and you know, the way that it looks like he is wearing a suit, David Cornsweat is wearing a suit, and you can see his musculature through the suit, you know, to a degree. But honestly, it's the same amount of musculature you could see on any other version of Superman who is wearing spandex, because you can't wear even spandex that's made by a costumer that form fits the body to show what they look like on the page. So everybody's like, Henry Cavill is CGI. Well, and padded muscles. Well, no, all of his shirtless scenes were not CGI. That was him.
No, let's be honest, James.
then-
you know that you
and
were the
then-
stunt double for those.
And then in the suit, like I said, even with spandex, no matter how tight they make it, you're not going to get it to look like it comes off of the page. And that's what that suit was designed to look like. It was designed to look and mimic his musculature and look like it was a skin tight suit. So you know what I mean? It's like a little, it's just a little bit of like you're thinking about it in one way just to have a negative comment about it. And same thing with Corn Sweat's suit. People are talking about it in one way just to make it negative and not even thinking about like what's going on or what the look they're trying to achieve is on screen.
There was a post the other day that said, if you were Superman for the day, which one of these suits would you pick? And it was Corn Sweat's, Cavill's, and Christopher Reeve. And I was like, Corn Sweat. I was like, one,
Corn Sweats looks the most comfortable.
it looks comfortable.
Yeah.
Two, I would feel very rigid, stiff. Like Cavill's always looks very stiff and hard to move in. I was like, and I don't have the body for tights. So I'm going with Corn Sweats.
It's like my body just cuts out suit, Chris Reeves.
Yeah, that looks like that. The Cavill suit, it looks good on screen, but man, that thing looks like it's really uncomfortable to wear. It just looks like molded rubber. It's just like, no.
His whole workout was he just put the suit on and just like moved his arms, and he was like, it's a workout. Like, that's how he got ripped, is just wearing the suit.
So
walking around in the suit every day.
Well, also too, people don't realize that the shirtless scenes he bulked up specifically for those. When he was in the suit, he wasn't that bulky.
Yeah, they trained for peak condition for those few days so they could shoot the shirtless scenes.
Yeah, and also dehydrate themselves and all that kind of stuff to get them, that cut. Because really, you don't guys who can actually lift a lot of weights, they don't look that cut. They look like they wrestle bears on mountains.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what James does.
I try.
Don't let him fool you. Just don't let him go in the woods at night.
Right.
But hey,
the Revenant.
James was the bear in that movie. You didn't know. But today we're kicking off, as we are doing each month, we are going back and we are looking at the next iteration of the character. And we are up to Brandon Routh. In today's special episode, I have it titled, drum roll, please. I just try to quote National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation throughout the year. Brandon Routh, his own Superman. This is my guided notes that prove that Brandon Routh was not, that it's time to admit that Brandon Routh is his own Superman and not just a Christopher Reeve knockoff. That even in Superman Returns, he wasn't playing Christopher Reeve the way people thought. He is his own Superman. And that Superman Returns is an example of a soft reboot. So that's where we're going to start today. But first, a little bit of a history lesson. I did a deep dive in what I call flyby. So here, for anyone who doesn't know, it's one of the most convoluted things in Hollywood history, I swear to God, that there was from like early 2000s till Superman Returns was released. There was production going in, and there was the film that was supposed to be directed by McG, and it was based on the script. It was supposed to be called like Superman Man of Steel or something, but the code name was Flyby, and it's forever known as Superman Flyby. And Brandon Routh screen tested for it. These are two images that exist of him screen testing for Flyby. It was the script based on the J.J. Abrams story. And basically what was happening is at this time, and it's so confusing. Like, I found a really great documentary, like fan-made documentary on it that I listened to the other day of just all the changing of like directors from McG to it was McGee, Brett Ratner, and then Bryan Singer, and it's like they just kept changing things over, and they were going to go film in Australia. They had all this stuff going on, and they had a horrible time trying to cast Superman. And it wasn't till like McGee dropped out, the film was going to fall into disarray. And by that time, they'd already had a conversation with Bryan Singer, and he stepped in with a new script, and then he cast Brandon Routh, and then they continued to make Superman Returns. So, any just kind of thoughts from either of you about Flyby?
I don't know a whole lot about Flyby, just some of the stuff we've talked about. And I think I've seen like this image on the left that you've got. But the image on the right, I kind of like that suit from the angle, the coloring, the symbol. Not too bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I'm like, why didn't they use that suit? That suit looks tight.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit because, and that's where we go. We'll talk about that as we dive in. But I'm just gonna say this: we're not done with Flyby yet, but we are for today.
Was Flyby the one with the Kryptonian kung fu and like Lex Luthor was like a CIA agent who was a secret Kryptonian and all that stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad we missed that.
So my biggest hate on that script was the fact that Krypton didn't blow up, and it was a battle between King Jor-El and his brother, and his brother was basically overthrowing his brother Jor-El's kingdom, and they sent Prince Kal-El off to Earth. And yeah, I'm like, no, I don't like them being royalty. X that completely out. The whole point of the story is Krypton has to be destroyed, or you just lose part of the beauty of the story. So, but here we go, guys. Brandon Routh. There's his Superman. There's his Clark. Now, let's go back to this time. Perry, how is your feelings towards this? Like, how did you first learn about this movie? How are you feeling? Your hype, everything.
I was totally psyched for this film. I love the Christopher Reeve movies, and the fact that Singer was going back to the Christopher Reeve films, and this actually, because of this movie too, we were able to finally get the Donner cut of Superman 2 as well, was an added bonus to that. And I love the two X-Men films he did, right? He did X-Men, he did X2. I'm a huge X-Men fan, and I love both of those movies. So I was totally, even though this meant he wasn't doing X-Men 3, which was a bummer, I was totally on board for his Superman. And I was following the news pretty closely as stuff was coming out. So I remember seeing this promo pic, and the costume didn't excite me the most, right? I think even now looking at it now, I still think there are some issues with it. The trunks are too slim. The neckline's too high. The S shield is too small. I think the red's a bit too dark. But I like the new, like, little tweak on the S shield. I think that's cool. Also, the S belt buckle, I've always thought that's kind of an unnecessary design choice whenever people do that. It's like, he's got it on his chest. He doesn't need it on his belt buckle as well. We're kind of like putting a hat on a hat there. But when we saw that first trailer, I was totally sold with his Superman. And when we saw Superman Returns, like, I loved it. I saw it like maybe 3 times in the theater. I loved it when it came out. Over time, my opinions cooled on it a little bit. A lot of the flaws kind of come out a lot more, but his Superman is definitely not one of them. Like, I thought he was completely on point in this. And of all the actors who've played Superman, none of them was robbed more than Brandon Routh.
I agree. He did get robbed. So when they first announced this, I remember seeing the poster and being super excited. And then I remember seeing the teaser trailer, that first one that like opens up on the Kent farm. I think it was my brother and I did a double feature. We watched Walk the Line and then Harry Potter 4. And I think it played in front of both of those movies. And you know what? I didn't really have as much problems with the costume when I first saw it. Like, I just was excited to see Superman on the big screen because this was my first big screen Superman, and then of course I was like, okay, over time I was like, the shield's too small because he's such has a long torso, and I don't like the t-shirt style high neckline. But I just remember being so psyched. And this movie, I saw it in theaters like 5 times because it was one of those I saw it late at night, but then like certain friends would want to go, and then it was back when they would do 3D, but it was only certain scenes were 3D. So you'd be watching the movie, then it would flash like, put on your 3D glasses, and it made it so much more enjoyable. And like the 3D scenes were, let's see if I can remember them all. Him as a child running through the corn, the airplane rescue, Luthor going to the fortress. I know at the end with the Kryptonite Island. I think there was a couple more, but it was just
What about
really,
the Metropolis disaster scene? Was that one in 3D?
I want to say yes, but I don't remember. But it was exciting, and I thought he looked really good, and there's some things in the movie, like we're going to be doing a live watch here soon, and we'll, talk through those. But I was just excited to see Superman. I've talked multiple times about how I went to Walmart and found that standee and of like all the Superman stuff, and it was so exciting. And like you said, any of the flaws in this film, none of them are to Brandon. They're all Bryan Singer. But here's my
the suit. I mean, honestly, for the suit, for me, it was always just the red was a little too dark and the cape looked heavy. The movie was beautifully shot. Brandon Routh, I loved it, and I mean, I was super excited to see Superman on the big screen because, I mean, me and you are the same age. I mean, we weren't old enough to see Superman on the big screen. None of those movies were on the big screen when we were kids. We didn't get a friggin' big screen Superman until 2006.
Exactly. And like, here's some of the merchandise stuff I found, like just like displays and stores, and I have a couple more later. But like the Burger King cups, the Slurpee cups, cereal. Like, I just really love the hype for this movie. I had the Superman. I should have worn my Superman Return shirt. Damn it! I didn't think about it. I just grabbed one.
I used to have one, but it's got fit. I think it got torn a while back, so unfortunately I don't have it anymore. But yeah, I had one. I wore it a lot. Loved that thing.
I had one from Hot Topic, and it was the softest, most favorite Superman shirt I ever had. And my ex fiance took it. I hope she burns in Hades for that. But it just like I don't have it on me, but I bought the belt buckle for this movie. And it was my favorite belt buckle, and I wore it till it broke. And then I found another one that was used, and I bought because I love the belt buckle because this movie holds a special place in my heart for my Superman fandom. It just came around at the right time in my life when I needed this Superman movie. So even with its flaws, it holds such a special place in my heart. And I like the 3DS on the costume compared to just kind of feeling like it's, we have examples of it feeling like it's sewn on like a patch. Then we have examples where it feels like it's just screen printed. I like it like this. I don't know about you guys.
I dig the shield a lot. Even now, I think it's a really cool. It's like a slight modernization on the classic symbol, and it works for it works for this movie, I think. And even still, I think I kind of dig the design of it.
Now, what did you think of his Clark styling and just his Clark all around?
So I think from what we saw of it, his Clark, and this is the unfortunate thing, is like we didn't get to see enough of it, but what we did see of it, I really liked, because I got some problems with some of the other versions of Clark Kent that we've seen. I think Christopher Reeve, love his Superman, but his Clark is a little bit too over the top. And I feel like the whole point of Clark Kent is he is supposed to be this guy who makes it easy for Superman to hide among the Metropolis, what I call Metropolis Clark identity, is it's supposed to make it easy for him to hide in, but it's kind of hard to hide when you are constantly bumping into things and you're tripping over yourself all the time. So that was an issue I had with the Christopher Reeve one. And then when you got to like the Dean Cain one, I felt that he was, first off, I'm going to say it right here. I'm sure probably some of your audiences want to crucify me, but I hate John Byrne's Man of Steel reboot. With some exceptions, there's some things I like about it, but
I'm with you.
I hate what he did to Clark Kent. Yeah. Yeah. I think that his Clark is way too arrogant. And I think what I love about Clark Kent is I love it when he's got a quiet confidence. He's not showy about it.
Yes.
And Dean Cain was way too showy. He came off as way too arrogant as Clark Kent for my tastes. And then you have, Henry Cavill, didn't really have much of an opportunity, but there was not really much to his Clark Kent performance. Tyler Hoechlin kind of grew into it, and he had kind of this, which I do love Tyler Hoechlin's Clark Kent now, where it's kind of like the ultimate nerdy dad. So yeah, I love that part
Clark,
of it.
You got to juggle, because so much of the Clark that we get is with people that know both sides, and he doesn't have to play it as hard when he's in Smallville than when he's like in Metropolis, and then we get the flashbacks of him in Metropolis. So you gotta kind of roll with like who he's around with his Clark.
Right. Yeah. So, but I think Brandon Routh is kind of what I think Clark Kent should be. He's the guy that you never know is there, right? He's like the ultimate wallflower. And I think that's the perfect trait for an investigative reporter, because that famous scene from The Wire where Stringer Bell, he sees the guy writing down, he's like, "Are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy?" And he tears the paper out and he throws it away. I could imagine Brandon Routh's Clark Kent standing in the background there and then going over to the trash can and picking it out.
Yeah, I mean, that is the wallflower is the perfect, because like there's certain scenes that he falls in the background. You don't know he's there. You kind of dismiss him. He doesn't really stand out too much. But I love his costuming for his Clark, because I love the tones, like the earth tones for Clark. So now this is part of my argument here. Okay. Look at the suit. Look at boom. Not the same suit. Not even the same glasses and style. Okay. This is part of my argument that Brandon Routh is doing his own thing. Okay. Now, here we have
There's
Jimmy.
a stylishness to his. I never noticed this before, but he's a pretty stylish guy as Clark Kent.
He is. He has a nice suit, like his 3-piece suit. So, talk about Jimmy Olsen. Either of you, go.
I thought Sam Huntington was another one of those things that I thought was a fun addition to this movie. I thought I really liked his Jimmy. Sometimes maybe a little bit too over exuberant with Clark's return, with like the cake and all that. But overall, I thought I really liked his take on the character. So yeah, I dug his Jimmy.
As of right now, I think he's the best Jimmy Olsen. I think it's between him and Jack from The Adventures of Superman. And I say that as of right now.
I have not
without seeing like Skylar from the new one. I mean, I like Jimmy Olsen in this movie. I I love the actor as well. I mean, Fanboys and Being Human and Detroit Rock City, and of course I did think that he was a little bit hyper. It did lend itself to that idea that he is this young photographer but also if he's been gone for the last couple of years, like he might have matured a little bit more, not like he's this cub photographer intern anymore. But that's just, that's a writing choice, I feel. Direction choice.
But Sam Huntington is not Mark McClure. He's not playing Mark McClure. Okay. Now, I want you to visualize real quick. Outside the Daily Planet right here with Brandon Routh. Okay. Outside the Daily Planet in the Christopher Reeve films. Not the same. Top of the Daily Planet right here. Top of the Daily Planet right here. Not the same. Now, Perry White, I think, is a tricky character to get. Because I think in today's modern world, we've been saturated with J. Jonah Jameson so much that it's almost like hard to not make Perry like that. But Jackie Cooper was always my favorite Perry. And Frank Langella, I think, is a very weak Perry White, almost very forgettable. There's not really anything to his performance. Frank Langella is not playing Jackie Cooper. Okay?
No, not at all. Yeah, he's very subdued as Perry White. Yeah, I'm trying to figure, because he was brought in after the fact, wasn't he? Because there was someone else that was originally cast for it. I'm trying to look it up and see who
he was a later addition. It's very tricky when you're looking at the casting because, like I said, it was Superman Flyby that rolled into Superman Returns, all kind of mixed together, and a lot of last minute changes.
I just found it, and it was Hugh Laurie who was originally cast.
Yes.
That would have been interesting, man. I would have loved to see Hugh Laurie play Perry White.
He would have brought a gravity.
Definitely, yeah. But he had commitments to filming House, so he had to back out. But man, that would have been something if we could have seen him as Perry White. And I like Frank Langella, but yeah, he just doesn't really do much for me as Perry White. Honestly, my favorite is probably, I really like Lane Smith. Weird Elvis obsession aside, I thought when they got into the Elvis obsession stuff, it got over the top. But besides that, I really dug Lane Smith. Lawrence Fishburne, I thought could have done a good job, but I just hated the material he was given. Like the whole, the American conscious died with John, Bobby, and Martin was just, that's not Perry White. Like Perry White's the only one who'd be saying the opposite of that.
Yeah. It was just, like I said, Frank Langella to me was just kind of a very bland. Now we're going to get into Lois Lane. Kate Bosworth. My wife had a great epiphany one day, and she's going to articulate that in another episode. But I've always ranked Kate Bosworth at the bottom. Okay. She was my worst Lois Lane. But then I talked with my wife because she's amazing. And she actually pointed out, and I agree with her now, that Amy Adams is the worst Lois Lane. And Kate Bosworth is just right above her. Barely. But just right above her.
Barely.
But Kate Bosworth, first of all, completely miscast. She is too young looking. Like, she looks younger than what she is. Okay. Like, I understand you want to cast young because you want to build a franchise out. I get that. But she looks too young. Okay. And she is not playing Margot Kidder. Okay.
No, not at all.
So, but what is your thoughts, guys, on Miss Bosworth here as our Lois Lane?
Yeah, pretty much what you said. Like, I don't hate her as much as everybody else does, but she's definitely not my favorite. I think she has a few moments here. Like, I think she's got some degree of the tenaciousness, but she feels like the script doesn't really give her the opportunity to really push it further. Although, man, Kerry Russell was considered apparently for this role, and she would have been amazing, I think.
But that's when it was more under JJ's toolage because
Oh, was
you know,
that part of the JJ ones? Okay.
because he created Felicity and she was Felicity. So that's part of when she was in the conversation. Like it gets really confusing, but yeah, she would have been much, much better. She just has the attitude too. She has the gravity to it. Kate Bosworth doesn't have the gravity.
Yeah, she was never my favorite Lois by any means. She didn't even really stand out in any way really. And I don't know, her willingness to take her child into possible imminent danger was quite questionable. I'm sure she didn't expect to run into Lex Luthor at the time, but
speaking of Lex,
she was too young. She I mean, she doesn't look like she could have a 10-year-old kid.
Well, 5, I think.
Is that all he was?
He's supposed to. He's only been 5 years since.
Oh yeah, it's only been 5 years. Yeah.
And trust me, after having children and a 5-year-old and stuff, you start thinking, yeah, something.
And that kid wasn't 5.
Well, also, too, they were talking about his grades in gym class. I'm like, what 5-year-old is going to gym class?
Yeah, what kind of school? Like
their grades in it? Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah. There's no kindergarten gym class where they're getting a grade. Kindergarten gym is recess.
Like it's like, I mean, like even Selah in her, 3rd grade, still certain like specials gets satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So yeah, there's no grades. Now, speaking of Lex, we have Mr. Kevin Spacey, who's really not playing at all Gene Hackman's Lex.
I mean, this I can push back on because I do think when you take into the fact that he's been in prison for 5 years, I think you could see Gene Hackman's Lex becoming Kevin Spacey's Lex, like after what he'd been through in prison. I could see that. So that's my pushback on that.
Okay, I'll accept it. What did you think of Kevin Spacey as Lex?
I loved his Lex. Caveat: the dude's a freaking monster in real life, but
yeah, I mean,
I thought
it's this is an ongoing rule.
Separating character. This is separating artist from the art.
There are people that get brought up that have controversy around them because of things, and we are only looking at the performance of the character, not condoning any of the actors' behaviors.
Yeah. So. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. I like my ideal Lex Luthor is more like the Clancy Brown version or like the Michael Rosenbaum version from Smallville. So the whole smarmy type of Lex Luthor, I'm not a fan of that. But that being said, I thought Spacey brought a ruthlessness to Lex that I thought worked when we're considering that this is supposed to be of a type with the Donner films. So in that vein, I like him as like a modern day version of the Luthor from the Donner films. I think that works. Especially like when he and just like some of the lines he has with Parker Posey, like the whole the demonstration in the basement with the model. I love that whole sequence. The kryptonite shiv, when he jabs it into Superman, he twists it and breaks it off. And then he says, and he hisses like, "Now fly." I love that moment too. So yeah, I'm a fan of his Luthor.
Yeah, I'm actually a really big fan of his Luthor as well. As a modern take on the Hackman version, he did a great job, and yeah, he was ruthless. He was, but I feel like if they would have given him more of the post-crisis Luthor, Kevin Spacey would have killed it. He would have knocked it out of the park. He would be rivaled as one of the greatest Lex Luthors in any live action version of Superman.
Well, absolutely.
It would have been amazing if it was written differently, and it was amazing as it was. It was just trying to play off of the nostalgia and trying to just bring that to then bring 1978 to 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Picture the bald Lex Luthor with Kevin Spacey doing Frank Underwood, but with no Southern accent, and would have been perfect.
Okay. You know, it's kind of like, not to jump ahead another month, but like if Jesse Eisenberg had just played Mark Zuckerberg, his Lex would have been much better.
No, I mean, like him with when they first showed that image of him with the shaved head, I'm just like, yeah, I'm digging this. I'm on board. And after seeing him in The Social Network, I'm like, yeah, he could do this. And then they just decided to go do a riff on Jim Carrey's Riddler for some reason. So I don't know what they were thinking.
But I agree, if Lex had been given more post, because I think that's my biggest issue is we're trying, like, Singer's playing with this, like, oh, I'm trying to pick up from the Christopher Reeve Donner films, ignoring 3 and 4, but he's really not, and that's part of what I'm proving here.
Yeah, unfortunately with Eisenberg, I mean, they were just kind of trying to go that tech bro way because it was the thing at the time, you know, so he had to be this tech bro instead of being Lex Luthor. And he would have done great as Lex Luthor, even with some of the quirkiness that he had, but it was just some odd choices and you know, the way that they had to go with that tech bro kind of side.
Right here, Ma Kent, not the same Ma Kent. Okay, not playing the same Ma. Look at the farm. Okay, look at the farm. Similar, not the same. Okay, now I had a version of this that had some more slides, but something happened and it didn't save right, and I couldn't retrieve it. But I had scenes of Clark as a child. In the Donner films, they're growing wheat. It's wheat fields. Superman Returns, cornfields. Okay, so not the same farm. Now, we're going to take a little quick sidestep as we transition, okay? This is where it gets a little nerdy, guys. You ready? You guys okay?
Yep,
Holding
let's
on?
go for it.
Okay. The multiverse, the Flash, Supergirl, etc. Now, here we have the two Flashes meeting, showing that the Flash TV series connects with all of DC. And that Ezra Miller.
Hold on, 1 second. Wait. Is this AI? Because I have never seen this Flash on the left. That Flash does not exist in my memory.
You just forgot. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. But you got to roll with me on this. So Ezra Miller's Flash, okay, meets Grant Gustin's Flash. Okay, it's important here. Which then brings us to Crisis on Infinite Earth, which was Brandon Routh's return to the character and his swan song redemption. Okay. In this, his Clark, let's look at his Clark here. Shit. Very much similar to the Clark we saw earlier. Okay. He's now editor-in-chief. He mentions his son Jason, which was the name of the boy revealed to be his son in Superman Returns. And he talks about how there was an attack and it killed everybody. His costume, for this being a great Superman costume, to me, this is the number one, if not number one, number two best Superman costume in live action. But it's still reminiscent of Superman Returns in little parts. Like the boots are similar, the bodysuit style similar, the 3DS, the trunks. I like these trunks better.
Yeah, it felt like they were definitely compensating for the tiny trunks in the Superman Returns suit.
But it just feels like someone who's grown and matured a little bit, just tweaking their costume. You know, but how did you feel, Perry, when we found out Brandon was coming back and playing Superman again?
Oh man, I was so psyched. Again, like at that time, he was Christopher Reeve in a separate category, but at that time he was probably my favorite Superman actor. So I was totally on board with him coming back. And when we saw that first image of him in the costume, and I lost my shit. He looked perfect. Yeah, and I loved how because they said at the time he's just playing Kingdom Come Superman. So when we actually watched Crisis and they'd weaved in all these things, like we brought in the Kingdom Come stuff. They obviously made him the same one from Superman Returns because he mentions his son Jason. But two, they also retroactively inserted Superman 3 into the Superman Returns continuity because he talks about how it's not the first time that I've gone crazy and fought myself.
So right there, okay, that little bit there shows he's his own Superman. He's not just playing a version of Christopher Reeves. We're in the multiverse. He's his own Superman. I wish he would have got more. I hate how they kind of wrote him out in the Crisis, but it wasn't he wasn't one of the prominent actors. He was just kind of he was there, but I love seeing him there. Hello.
I wish we would have gotten like some sort of, because they had multiverse stuff in Superman and Lois. So my biggest hope was that we would see some sort of crossover or something with the Brandon Routh Superman coming into Superman at Lois or something like. So I was really disappointed we never got to see anything more with them.
It would, where they ended up going with Superman and Lois being on its own Earth, because that brings us to the next slide where we have the post-crisis universe rebuild that the Oliver Queen Spectre rebuilds. And then this is him back to having the yellow. This is, him on the Earth now. And then that Earth, is created. The Superman and Lois Earth is created out of that. So this is our final image of Brandon as Superman right here doing the classic. Now, love it or hate it, this happened. Not a fan, but it's part of my argument. In The Flash, it establishes the Reeve and the Supergirl are still on an Earth. Okay? Love it or hate it and hate it. We all hate it. It happened. It's there. So that shows that their Earth is still alive. Okay? It's out there. Okay? So
right, post-crisis.
And I don't have my last slide.
Point.
So boom. My final point is because of that, Brandon Routh is his own Superman. He's not in the continuity of DC. He was playing his own Superman on an adjacent Earth. He is not just Christopher Reeve.
Right.
Well,
the multiverse theory as it was anyways, something that we actually just which nobody's heard yet, we talked about Superboy going into other Earths, and the idea of with DC, it was, especially early on, it was the infinite Earths, and it's all of the it's every decision that can create a new Earth. It's infinite Earths, infinite decisions, infinite possibilities. So even if at some point Christopher Reeve and Brandon Routh had almost an identical trajectory, they would split.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it would take to have a new Earth where he goes his way, where eventually he becomes something of a Kingdom Come type Superman, which wasn't all the way like Kingdom Come, because obviously when he went Kingdom Come, he disappeared, he isolated himself, a lot of other things happened, and then in Crisis on the CW, when Kevin Conroy played Bruce Wayne and he had the Kingdom Come suit on for Bruce, that it was also a different Earth. So it wasn't even the same Earth where that Superman and that Batman were teamed up. So I mean that diverges that even as well.
So exactly. So there we have it. Brandon Routh needs to be looked at as his own version of the character. That is my whole thesis here. Is Superman Returns was a soft reboot in the spirit of what had come before on film, because everything else that was trying to be remade, or every Superman movie they were trying to take, was trying to take it in drastic different trajectories. You know, we've talked about the Nick Cage Superman Lives before, and that was trying to take it in different, and everyone was trying to spin some sort of new Superman property out of the death of Superman, and this came along and tried to take it back. But like I said, it is the same spirit, but is its own thing, and Brandon deserves that respect of being his own Superman, and his film being looked at as just being a reboot. I mean, much like, okay, let's think about this with Superman 2025. We know it's not an origin. Okay. So, you know, in a way, Superman Returns wasn't an origin. It was just picking up and starting from a point. So
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah, it would be like the first Superman movie that's not an origin movie. You know the story of Superman. You know that he would have potentially probably taken down Lex Luthor and he'd be in prison. And I mean, yeah, they give him the story. If there's any possibility that Krypton still exists, he went out to look for it, and that's where you get him, honestly, and I mean, heck, that picks up Superman many years down the road, farther than we're looking to see where he's at coming up in the new movie this in July.
Yeah, so I may be, my speaker's disconnected for a second there, so if I'm going over anything you guys had said,
No, you're good.
my apologies.
Oh, you're
but
good.
yeah, my whole thing with Superman Returns, and a few years back we covered this on the show, and we're going to be replaying all our Superman episodes in the lead up here to Superman 2025. But one of the things I said is that it is, if you look at it as a direct sequel to Superman and Superman 2, it doesn't fit. There's a lot of parts that just don't fit together beyond just all the design aesthetics, like you'd pointed out, but even just like their story beats, right? The whole idea of, especially because this is pre-Donner cut, right? So remember, this movie was conceived of before the Donner cut. So if you look at it that way, you have Lois. That means that Lois had to have gone through that amnesia kiss, right? If you're looking as a direct sequel. So that means that she would have no memory of sleeping with Superman. So that creates a big problem when you get to the part about, she obviously clearly knows that Jason is his son, because I don't know how the amnesia kiss works in that way, because when she gets the amnesia kiss in Superman 2, it seems like she doesn't know anything from like the past few weeks.
Right. Which is horrible.
Which is horrible. And also, yeah, I hate the amnesia kiss for so many different reasons, but if you look at this as a direct sequel to Superman 2, then her thought at that moment has to be, did Superman rape me in my sleep or something like that? So that's one problem. First off, the second problem is just the whole timeline. Just like you said, she is so young, so she doesn't look like she could have been a skilled. Like, I could buy Kate Bosworth in a Superman reboot movie as Lois Lane, like fresh out of college. Like, if you're looking like My Adventures of Superman type of take or something like that, I could buy her as Lois Lane there. But as the seasoned veteran who was a seasoned veteran 5 years ago, no, she looks way too young to be playing that part. And just so many things just don't fit together. Mostly having to do with the kid stuff, especially because, Richard is under the belief that Jason is his biological son, right? That seems to be the key that we're given there.
Now,
that seems to be what he's operating on. So that means that she would have had to have, as soon as Superman left, she would have had to have met Jason, started dating him, and basically have been in a situation where they've conceived a child right off the bat for this timeline to make sense. So the timeline just does not work. So for this, so yeah, I've never looked at this as a direct sequel to Superman 2 and Superman 2. Instead, I've looked at Superman and Superman 2 as kind of being a loose connection point. Like similar events happened in this universe that happened in the Donner films, but it's not a direct one-to-one continuation.
And which is weird because that seemed to be what, for all of what Singer had talked about he wanted to do like that, he didn't do it. You know, like he didn't. And now I do not remember where in the process that, because originally Jason was supposed to be Richard's son. In most of the drafts of it, he was Richard's son. But then somewhere they decided, now we'll just make it Superman's son. And I think it would have been better if it had just been left as being Richard's son. And just, I think that would have been a much more stronger way to go with the story. Because you're reintroducing it. Because, you know, even if you're looking at things, Lois never really liked Clark. Like, even Margot Kidder's Lois, she never really took Clark serious and never really liked Clark. He was just there as a friend and was like, she even says, well, Clark, he's Clark. So like, he's not winning any, you know, affection beats from her as being who he is. You know, Lois in the, I never liked the relationship between Lois and Clark in the Donner films because she was just obsessed with Superman like a childish girl. She knew nothing about him or anything. And, you know, Clark / Superman kind of just, you know, he knew it. He pulled on some heartstrings and stuff on her. So.
No, I agree. Like the Margot Kidder's Lois has not aged well. Like she comes off across as way too starstruck and way too smitten when it comes to Superman. And I don't like that version of Lois.
Yeah, me neither. Now,
yeah, I mean the only close thing to that is Terry Hatcher's infatuation with Superman in that. But in that you can kind of see, that you can kind of see that there's this level of attraction and like lusting that she has for him, but she's not like that's the only thing. You know, she had some dimensions, she had levels, you know, she cared about Clark before she knew that he was Superman. You know, maybe it wasn't like what we got in Superman and Lois, but it was closer. But yeah, before that, yeah, like you said, Margot, she could almost give, you know, Clark not even 2 seconds out of the day. But as soon as if he would stand up straight and take off his glasses like he did before he slouched back down in the first movie, if he'd have done that, she'd have just been like Clark who, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't age very well.
Now, Brandon was Superman until he wasn't. Superman Returns, it did well at the box office, but it didn't do what they wanted it to do, which is a shame because, one, the movie was criticized for having no real action villain. They tried to bring back like Luthor, still trying to do land scheme plots, and you know, it really didn't give Superman an adversary that modern audiences in film would want to see. And, you know, much like X-Men, Bryan Singer had said, well, that'll be the sequel, you know, and Bryan Singer is not an action director. Okay. So that needs to be made apparent But
yeah, even X2 being so much better than the first one, the action is not like the biggest or the best compelling part of the movie.
Brandon Routh was Superman up until was it 2010? I think is when they officially said, because the sequel for for Superman was going to use like Man of Steel. It was going to have that
was gonna be the title,
terminology in it. I think one thing was supposed to be that the crater he threw into space takes orbit and starts growing new Krypton. Was one of the storylines that was tossed around as an idea. But they were working on the sequel, but it just, one of the negatives that went towards the film was they had spent so much money on the stop, start, go for the other Superman projects that they pushed that money into like the numbers of this budget, wanting this film to do enough to recoup all that. So it ballooned this film's budget past what was actually spent on making the film. And that hindered it. And so it was, I believe it was in 2010 when they officially announced that they were going to do a new reboot. And
it looks like Singer's contract expired in 2009.
Okay.
And then Singer. Okay, so yeah, it's roughly around there. So yeah, something around there. It's kind of muddled here in the Wikipedia, but yeah, around 2009 is when his oh, sorry, that was Routh's contract expired. Routh's contract for a sequel expired in 2009, and then Singer dropped out of the sequel to direct Jack the Giant Slayer, and then at that point, they'd kind of decided to pivot and to do the reboot.
So Man of Steel was officially announced August 4th, 2011. So that was the official, this is where we're going. We are completely rebooting it. And that's when, really Brandon was Superman no more.
And also too, like there's some weird things, not only the fact that they folded in all the development hell budget into the cost of this movie, but they had spent their money in some really weird ways in this movie too. Like they had like these tiny little, like this, they had like these tiny little, the S shield is like incorporated to so many different parts of the costume, like even like on the soles of the boots and all that. It's like, nobody is seeing that stuff. We don't have to go to that level of detail for this. I think they also had they had commissioned like all these different newspaper articles for the newsroom headlines too. And it's just like, this is, at some point you are just literally burning money here. You don't need to put all this stuff into it.
I'm trying to remember
so another podcast I host is about Japanese movies, and we talked about the film Redbeard that was directed by Kurosawa. And Kurosawa wasted a lot of the budget on things that never ended up in the movie, like making sure there were period era medical instruments in the drawers of the medical cabinets that are never opened in the movie.
Oh, geez. Next year we'll talk about a movie that just peed on its budget. But you were saying, like, I read something, or I was listening to something. They're talking about his costume, like Brandon Routh, and how like the fabric it was difficult, like to move, or it was something. And I was like, then why are you making the costume out of this? Why is the suit being made? And how many different suits they had to make? Hundreds of these suits that cost, high volumes of dollars. And I'm like, then you're obviously making the suit wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what's crazy is in some points of the film, he wore contacts. They try to make his eyes blue, or they try to touch him up. And then like, there's some shots they just didn't do it. Like even here, like this scene is him as Clark. His eyes are a little bit different colored than him over here as Superman. And there's shots in the movie that are prevalent, but his hair, his spit curl was a hairpiece. Like if you watch the making of, you can see where they had those hair pieces to attach and put in.
Why wouldn't you just use wax or product,
That is not necessary.
So, it's like you said, they wasted money in weird ways instead of being conservative. I mean, so they filmed in Australia, and they filmed in Australia because it was a lot cheaper. Okay. This is before everything was filmed in Georgia. And that was one of the reasons why McGee dropped out and all this. But this land where they actually paid, harvested, and grew corn. Like it was just a field of nothing. And they actually grew corn to make the cornfields and everything. And I'm like, I'm looking around my front yard and walking around Ohio, like you could literally just come here and film.
Yeah, how could that be? How could it be? I don't understand how it's cheaper to film in Australia and grow corn than it is to just do it at an actual cornfield in Ohio or in Illinois or anywhere in the Midwest. It does not make any sense.
I mean, that's why they filmed in Iowa for Man of Steel, you know.
Hey man, that's America for you for the last 60 plus years.
I just feel like, you know, there was I mean, I know that it, you know, like if you didn't tell me it was filmed in Australia, I wouldn't really know by looking at it, but there is a different feel towards like the outdoor scenes and stuff like that than there is like in other films. So all in all, I, like you said, I think Brandon Routh was a great Superman. I've had the pleasure of meeting him once before. I think he's my favorite Superman actor in the sense that I feel like he still embodies the role and always has a certain sparkle in his eye about it. And you see him pop up on discussions and everything more than a lot of other actors who've played the role and the character. And I think it's always a blessing to see just his love for it, even after all this time. And even after being cheated out of a sequel and kind of being disregarded,
almost forced out over at the CW is from what it kind of sounded like there towards the end when him and his wife were leaving.
Yeah, well, I mean, the CW was going downhill, but you know, I love that he got to come back in Crisis and kind of give a, hey guys, this is how I am kind of swan song to his Superman. And I wish, you know, James and I, like Perry, I don't know if you ever watched Titans.
Oh yeah.
Like when they introduced Superman, like that he was there in the last season stuff, James and I both wish that they would have just brought Brandon Routh in instead of stunt casting like a pair of boots on Titans. You know, and the scene where Superman's teaching Superboy to fly. We both wish they had just brought Brandon Routh in for an episode and he had been the Superman to Superboy. You know, we both had thrown out when they brought in Naomi when they were doing that show. And in the first episode, you see like Superman, which was just like a blur. You know, we're like, well, maybe they could use Brandon Routh again. Like, we both had really hoped that they would find ways with all these DC properties that were kicking around and teasing Superman that there'd be another chance for Brandon to really, you know, do the character. And
yeah, and that was at the time where you know, they didn't want to have all these different versions, or and you can have this the
yeah, even so wait, we lost him there, so I'll jump in while he's getting
you froze.
But yeah, I had the same thought, like, you know, when they were doing The Flash, you know, that I mean, nothing would have saved that movie, but
yeah, what have you had me come and direct it? I would have come and directed it for free.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, I would have written it for free too. But instead of doing these weird CGI desecrations of Christopher Reeve and George Reeves and the weird Nicolas Cage thing,
and
Brandon Routh is right there.
Brandon Routh even said he filmed scenes for it. He actually filmed scenes for that, and they didn't use them. So yeah, it just, you know, you talked about wasting money. That movie, to me, when you look at behind how it was made, wasted so much money. From shooting to building the neighborhood to the whole having to use the volume stage to have Ezra, how they did that whole thing using that technology. I feel like that was just a complete high price tag that didn't need to be. But no, back to what you said. Yeah, when you're doing the multiverse, Brandon could have been the Superman that pops up and things, connecting the multiverse and bringing them in, and it would have been something special to see. And so I think he got the the crap end of the stick.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Again, I maintain no Superman actor has been robbed more than he has been. It's just, even Henry Cavill got to have, he had his whole trilogy. He got to have his he got to do 2 versions of Justice League and give two different performances of the character in those 2 different versions too, because of all the reshoots and stuff.
I have a nice little.
Yeah, he was a different kind of Superman in the Whedon cut than he was in the Snyder cut. So he got to do his classic Superman. Even like Routh never really got that chance, because in Superman Returns, although he tried, you can see him trying to kind of do his own thing, but you can also feel the hand of Singer pulling him back and saying, "No, make it more like Chris. Make it more like Chris."
It makes me wonder if we could just go in and recut that entire movie with other takes, that maybe Brandon brought something, like, okay, Brandon, do a take, like how you would do it. All right, now just give me a take of how Chris would do it. And, Singer always chose that. Mm-hmm. Like it would be awesome to be able to go and like see if there's alternate takes that are more him putting his own spin on it. But we will next month, everybody, we will be doing our our discussion on the Cavill era, and I will end with an interesting. Perry was touching on it, how in some ways Superman Returns and Man of Steel are intertwined in a battle, and I'll explain that more next month. Mm-hmm. But I just feel that, for everything that's wrong with Superman Returns, story-wise and stuff like that, none of it falls to Brandon. He is great in that movie. I do enjoy it for him. I haven't watched it in a while. I've had the itch to watch it, but I've been holding off for our upcoming live watch because I really wanted to bring as much kind of fresh, haven't seen it in a few years, perspective to that. And that's coming up here soon. So, final thoughts, Perry. You go first, then James.
I think we said it all. Yeah, like he was robbed. I still would love to see him get a chance to play Superman again, some way, somehow. And so, hopefully, we can see something happen. And because obviously they're probably going to have some multiverse stuff, given James Gunn's obvious affinity for the Silver Age stuff. So maybe we can see him pop up again at some point in the future. Maybe eventually we will get a Crisis on Infinite Earths and he can play like the Earth 2 Superman or something. I don't know.
He'd be old enough by then for sure.
And I'm just at the point where I want my Superman to step back into the light and be like that hopeful icon, not as much the beaten down by everyone around them. So James, final thoughts on the era, anything to do with the Brandon Routh era, your excitement of, the Burger King, your excitement of just seeing Superman back. The summer of 2006 was one of the best summers of my life, for different reasons, but Superman being one of them that summer.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was the first time I got to see Superman on the big screen. I was really excited for it. I had the first time. Was I muted? Could you hear me?
No, you're good. You're good. We can hear you.
Okay. So it froze. I clicked my headphones, make sure. So, first time getting to see him on the big screen, after being a lifelong Superman fan. The movie was beautiful. I still think the movie is gorgeous. The cinematography, the action, the bit of action that it does have. You know, I think Brandon Routh did a very good job. I thought his Clark was good. He wasn't like bumbling.
Mhm.
And you know, his Superman was he had such a genuine characterization, a genuine portrayal, you know, of just this quiet confidence and goodness in the character. So, you know, I have an affinity for Superman Returns. You know, it has, you know, kind of soured, a little cooled, not soured, um, over the years, but I could still put it in and watch it anytime. And was really excited when he came back for Crisis. I wish they had done more, but you know, it was Supergirl's run to be in front. It was Supergirl's turn to be in front, and they did have Tyler coming up as Superman adjacent to her. So you know, he wasn't going to be like a big person. He wasn't going to be coming out and taking the role of Superman away. Uh, I would definitely want to see him play some sort of portrayal again if there was a right fit for it. I I like Brandon Routh as Clark as Superman. You know, as you did say, I mean, he did get shortchanged more than anybody. You know, no matter how badly Henry Cavill got screwed in the last couple of years, or the last handful of years, or damn near his entire time playing the character because of Warner Brothers and their knee jerk reaction at every single reaction. um, he still got years and multiple films to play the character in different way, you know, in and build him up, whereas Brandon did not.
Yep.
That's a great place to put it. Perry, thanks for joining us. Go ahead and plug your shows. Let people know where they can find you.
So yeah, the things that be interesting to most of your listeners are the Superhero Cinephiles podcast, superherocinephiles.com. It's also superherocinephiles.com on Blue Sky. Tyler's been on twice now, I believe.
Yep.
And we're going to be replaying some of his episodes. We're going to be doing in the lead up to Summer Superman, because I'm going to be busy with day job stuff. I am going to be re-releasing all the Superman episodes we've done up until this point. So all of those are going to be coming out starting very soon. So you can listen up to all our Superman coverage in the order of that those movies were released in. Tyler's been on one of those. You know, I'm not sure if he's been on this show, but I know you've been on his show. Anthony Desiato's been on one of those too.
Yep.
A bunch of other people,
Anthony's
a lot of
been on the
great
show.
guests on for those. Yeah. So a lot of fun in that. And if you like Japanese movies, I also host a podcast called Japan on Film, where we talk about Japanese cinema. And I'm an author. I've got some superhero books out there. You can find information about that by going to by going to percivalconstantine.com. That's from my author website. Go there. You can even get some free books. I got some free stuff that's available for people. You just sign up and you get some free stuff.
All right, man. Thank you for being here. Japes, as always, way to be great. And remember,